All right, so today we're diving into something that might sound kind of wild at first. Bitcoin as free speech. Like, can digital currency actually be protected under the U.S. Constitution? We're going deep on this legal argument, and it could really change how we see money, tech, yeah, even freedom of expression. All this comes from this article. Really lays out the case for Bitcoin as protected speech, First Amendment stuff. Now, I mean, the First Amendment, that's freedom of speech, religion, the press, all that. Not exactly thinking about Bitcoin when those come to mind, right?
Right, exactly. Usually we think about the First Amendment as like our right to say what we think, believe, that sort of thing. But when it's code, and Bitcoin is code, then, well, that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, and that's what caught my eye with this article. It's saying code, it's like a language, and Bitcoin being code, that's expression.
Exactly. And this idea, it's not totally new. There's this case, Bernstein v. United States, back in the 90s. The U.S. government, they actually tried to, like, restrict this encryption software,
Hmm.
saying it was dangerous, like weapons, so they had to control it.
Hold on, regulating software like it's a weapon. Seriously.
Oh, yeah, it was a huge deal early internet days. This grad student, Daniel Bernstein, he challenged it, said, look, this encryption software, it's a language, just math ideas expressed, so First Amendment right. And get this, the court agreed with him.
Wow. So this student, he fought the government over code and won. That's
It
wild.
was huge. That Bernstein ruling, it set a precedent. Code, its expression, just like speaking or writing. And that right there, that's become a major part of these arguments about Bitcoin and free speech.
So that case basically shifted how we think about code itself. It's not just for computers. It can be speech First Amendment territory.
Exactly. When you apply that to something like Bitcoin, well, it opens up a whole new can of worms.
And this is where things get really interesting. So this author, Ross Stevens, he takes this code as speech idea and runs with it. He's saying Bitcoin, it's not just code, it's a statement. It's expressing this belief in a system that's decentralized, financially speaking. And I got to say, he makes a pretty good case.
Stevens has these three core arguments, and they all come back to Bitcoin as expression. We'll get into each one, but his first point, it connects directly to that Bernstein case. Code can be speech. Bitcoin is code. Therefore, Bitcoin should have First Amendment protection.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But Stevens doesn't just stop at Bitcoin being code, does he?
Yeah.
He doesn't stop there.
Right, he doesn't. His second argument, it's all about this idea of expressive conduct.
Huh.
Stevens says that using Bitcoin, the whole thing, mining it, making transactions, just participating in the network, it's like an action. And that action, it shows you believe in what Bitcoin stands for.
So it's kind of like saying, I'm putting my money where my mouth is, but with Bitcoin.
Right.
Right. If you really believe in this whole decentralized financial system, you don't just talk about it, you use Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. It's aligning what you do with what you believe. Think about it like donating to a political campaign that's considered protected speech, even though it's about money. Stevens is saying using Bitcoin, especially to support, say, a cause you believe in, an organization, it's similar. It's like that kind of expressive conduct.
Oh, interesting. So like donating Bitcoin to a group that's fighting for internet freedom or something, that could be seen as a way of showing you support their cause. Instead of just saying, I believe in this, you're putting your Bitcoin where your belief is.
Exactly. It's like taking a financial transaction and turning it into a statement.
Okay, I see, yeah. Now, this third argument from Stevens, this is the one that really gets me thinking. He's saying the entire Bitcoin network, it's like this huge expressive association, and it's decentralized.
Yeah, this one's a little more, out there, but it's really interesting. He compares it to those traditional groups that the First Amendment protects, like political parties or advocacy groups. They form around shared beliefs, right? And they work together to promote those beliefs. And he says the Bitcoin network, with all its users, millions of them all over the world, they're connected by this shared belief in decentralized tech, in controlling your own finances. And that functions in a similar way to these other groups.
So even if they're not, like, meeting up in person or having rallies, just by being part of the Bitcoin network, they're engaging in a form of collective expression.
Exactly. That's the core of his argument. He's saying Bitcoin's more than just computers processing stuff. It's a community. They have this shared ideology, and what they do together, using Bitcoin, mining it, supporting it, that's how they express that ideology.
Well, it's like a digital protest, but instead of marching, they're voting with their computing power, with their Bitcoin.
It's a powerful analogy, and it raises the stakes for sure. If the Bitcoin network is seen as this expressive association, then if you try to regulate it, restrict it, that could be seen as going against the First Amendment rights of everyone using it.
So Stevens is painting this picture of Bitcoin as a vehicle for free speech. This way of saying, we believe in a decentralized future, but we both know the law is never that simple, is it?
Right, you got it. And this is where it gets really tricky. Stevens makes a good argument, but there are other arguments, legal precedents, that make it more complicated.
And that's where the Tornado Cash case comes in, right? That really throws a wrench in things.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tornado Cash, that's the one. Really makes you think twice about this whole thing.
It definitely throws a curveball into the mix. Tornado Cash, it's software, right? And it's made to make cryptocurrency transactions, anonymous.
It's like a privacy thing for your Bitcoin, yeah.
Yeah.
You said it's open source, so anyone can use it?
Exactly, and that's where the trouble starts. See, Tornado Cash itself, it wasn't meant for anything illegal, but because it can hide transactions, it attracted people who, well, they wanted to launder money, avoid sanctions, that kind of thing.
So it's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. And that's what got the developers in trouble.
You got it. The U.S. government, they hit them with money laundering charges. Their argument was that by making Tornado Cash, by putting it out there, they were helping criminal activity, even if they weren't directly involved in the illegal stuff themselves.
That's kind of harsh, isn't it? I mean, can you really be held responsible for how someone else uses your software? Especially if anyone can get it.
That's the big question, right? The developers, they said, look, we were just writing code, which, like we talked about, could be protected speech, that whole Bernstein precedent. But the court didn't buy it, not this time.
Why not? It seems pretty similar to that Bernstein case on the surface.
Well, this is where the law gets tricky. The court said there's a difference between writing code and actually running a business. They said Tornado Cash, because it was making these anonymous transactions happen, it was more like an unregulated bank than just expression. So they said those financial rules, those anti-money laundering laws, they apply here.
So even if code itself is like speech, the way it's used, what it's for, that can change how the law sees it.
Exactly. The Tornado Cash case, it shows that there's this tension between wanting to encourage new ideas, innovation, and stopping bad stuff from happening. The legal system is still trying to figure out how those old laws, the ones about money laundering and such, how they fit with these new technologies, these decentralized open source things.
It's like we're in this gray area where the lines are blurry and the rules are being written as we go. So what does all this mean for Bitcoin? Does this mean if you try to use it anonymously, you're automatically in trouble?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, it might be up to the Supreme Court to decide. If they take on Bitcoin and free speech, it could completely change how cryptocurrencies are regulated, not just here, but everywhere.
It goes back to that basic question, right? Is sending Bitcoin more like sending a private message, which is protected, or is it like a bank transfer with all those rules and regulations?
It's a debate that's not going away anytime soon. Every case, like Tornado Cash, just adds another layer to it. It'll be fascinating to see how the law adapts as technology keeps changing.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. It makes you wonder if using Bitcoin, even for totally legal things, could be seen as suspicious just because it gives you some privacy. What does that mean for our financial privacy in this digital world? If just choosing how we use our own money is seen as a potential threat, what does that say about financial freedom in the future? Big questions. Seems like we're just starting to scratch the surface of how tech, personal freedom, and the law all intersect in this digital age. That's something to think about. Until next time, stay curious.